Now today we will see labor migration in India. So pest in Africa. What is pest? So it's a disease which is caused, and it is a contagious disease where in the cattle are affected, and it may lead to the death of that cattle. So the African population back then was wealthy and self-sufficient. So when this in 1880s, the population of Africa was quite wealthy and self-sufficient. When the Europeans tried to establish their colonies in Africa, they could not attend labor for the local, saw no need to earn wages. They were so well off, they were so wealthy, they had enough money, enough currency for themselves. They were self sufficient. So, when Europeans tried to rule Africa, they found that they are having very handful of the labor in their hand because no one was ready to work for them. So, in that case, what happened? Europeans trying to impose restrictions and change laws in the hope of generating labor. So they started putting restrictions. They had hard laws. They changed the laws with position of the assets, even the revenues were increased so that they will find somewhere that they have to earn more and they will get employed with us. That was the thought of them. Renderpester, a cattle disease, proved to be the most horrifying and yet promising way to satisfy their requirement. Why this renderpester disease has been given importance? Like after that, the cattle, they lost their cattle, and that is why farming was not very smooth that time. So this was all a horrifying scenario, and after that, they were in a requirement of wages. They were in a requirement of labor. They wanted to have employment then, the well-off people there. So this was very favorable for the Europeans. Okay, almost 90% of cattle were killed, and people's livelihood were snatched away. So the Europeans cashed on this opportunity to earn their control over the labor market. As you have seen, that there was slavery was there, and labor was like brought and sold. Okay, people were bought and sold, and they were called as slaves, right? So we have learned this in seventh standard on equality, if you remember, right? Do you remember on equality, slaves, right? Okay, thank you. Now, the concept of endangered labor was means widespread in India during the 19th century. What is the difference between slave and servant? Okay, slaves like they were brought and sold. Okay, whereas servants are hired for wages. Okay, yeah, even the slaves are paid but very less. But they were like, man, the buying and selling of slaves were there. And for 24/7 they were serving, like if they were slaves, then they can the owner can tell them n number of work, n number like at any hour of the day, whereas servants have a fixed duration of timing. Okay, so these are the differences. Okay, so the concept of endangered labor that was widespread in India during the 19th century. What that means is that the poor, when they couldn't pay back borrowed money, agreed to work as labor to pay off their debts. As you know, after the British rule came to India, they harassed the people. The revenues were increased for the on the crop. The crop failed. They had to take loans, and these loans were not repaid back. And with this, like going worst conditions, going against conditions, they had to agree to the concept of labors, of being laborers. Okay, endangered labor was picked from India and made to work in Caribbean, Fiji, Ceylon, etc. Because these were the countries or these were the areas where they were transferred. Now, this new system of slavery combined people of various cultures in strange land. So, unknown land and the people from various cultures were put together. Labor migration in India, their interactions led to the birth of cultural fusions. So, we can see in Malaysia and in Sri Lanka also people, Indian people whose origin is in India are seen there. This is because just of the labor migration. Okay? The colonial rule took the people from the poor country and made them work in their plantations. So we can find a fusion of culture, right? So might be you will feel that okay, there are some communities of India and America also in Australia also. Why so? Because of this migration of the people for work. Okay, and the culture also get fused whatever is feasible for them. They can't stick to the culture, they can't adapt new culture, so there is fusion of culture. Okay, but they try to relate to the culture. The Indian people try to stick to the culture of India. So their interactions led to the birth of cultural fusion and migration of Indians to other land. By the 19th century, Indian nationalist leaders abolished this system of slavery for abusive and cruel. Because as they said, now this labor migration, labor was also again it was treated as a slavery only. They were not given enough to eat. Okay, they were not like the working hours were full more than 10 hours or 12 hours. Okay, they were away from their family. They were not allowed to send the money to the family, and such harsh and abusive and cruel rules were formed by the colonial, the Britishers. So the nationalist leaders started raising voice against this, and finally they tried to abolish the system in the 18th century. So this was all about today's PPT, and you need to read from the beginning of the page where render pest starts till the second paragraph of the um, third page. Okay. So these pages are according to the old edition. The new editions have different page numbers. Okay. So now I will be sharing the textbook with you and you'll be reading that. Read the first paragraph.
Rinderpest was the cattle blackie.
Cattle.
In Africa, cattle. In Africa, in the 1890s, a fast-spreading disease of cattle plague or rinderpest
Plague
had a
me.
terrifying impact.
Just
Cattle plague or rinderpest had a terrifying impact on people's livelihoods and the local economy. This is a
just a
good
minute.
example of the
Yeah. So what was render pest? It was a plague. Plague means it is caused due to the rat. Okay. So the rats are infected with the virus and like they as and when they go on from one place to another, the same germs are carried with them and they affect the cattle. So that was known as the render pest or the cattle plague. So this next name of render pest is cattle plague. This can be asked for 1 mark question. So the first sentence was Sakshat read. Okay. In 1890s, a fast spreading disease of cattle plague or render pest. Okay. So underline that if you have the textbook or write it down for 1 mark question. Okay, what is the name of the what disease spread in 1890 in Africa? This can be question asked for 1 mark. Okay, right. Start reading it.
This is a good example of the widespread European empirical impact on colonized societies. It shows how, in the era of conquest, even a disease affecting cattle reshaped the lives and fortunes of thousands
Lives.
of people and their lives and fortunes of thousands of people and their relations with the rest of the world.
Next,
Historically, Africa had abundant land and a relatively small population. For centuries, lands and livestock sustained African livelihoods, and people rarely worked for a wage. In late 19th century Africa, there were few consumer goods that wages could buy. If you had been an African possessing livestock, there was plenty of both. You too would have seen little reason to work for a wage.
yeah, thank you. Next,
In late 19th century, Europeans were attracted to Africa due to its vast resources of land and minerals. Europeans Europeans came to Africa hoping to establish plantations and mines to produce crops and minerals for export to Europe. But there was an unexpected problem, a shortage of labor willing to work for wages.
thank you.
Okay. Employers used many methods to recruit and retain labor. Heavy
Yes,
taxes were imposed which could be paid only by working for wages on plantations and mines. Inheritance laws were changed so that peasants were displaced from land. Only one member of a family was allowed to inherit land. As a result of which the others were pushed into the labor market. Mine workers were also confined in compounds and not allowed to move about freely.
yes. Then came random pest, a devastating cattle disease. Okay. So here, as you can see that if there were four children in a family, only one was given the position of the land, okay, to own the land. The other rest were kept aside. They were not given the ownership of the land, so that now they will think that how I am going to earn. So they will become a labor. This was the policy followed by the Europeans who were ruling over Africa. Okay.
Then came rinderpest, a devastating cattle disease. Rinderpest arrived in Africa in the late 1880s. It was carried by infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers invading Eritrea in East Africa. Entering Africa in the east, rinderpest moved west like forest
Forest.
fire,
Yeah.
reaching Africa's Atlantic coast in 1892. It reached the Cape, Africa's southernmost
Southernmost.
tip, southernmost tip 5 years later. Along the way, rinderpest killed 90% of the cattle.
Okay, thank you. Next is, let me check out who is the next.
The loss of cattle destroyed of African livelihoods. Planters, mine owners, and colonial governments now successfully monopolized what scarce cattle resources remained. To strengthen their power and to force Africans into labor market control over these
Scarce.
scarce resources of cattle enabled Europeans colonies to conquer and
Colonizer.
subdue
Colonies name. Colonizers.
European colonizers to conquer and subdue Africa.
Yes. Read the
Similarly,
next part here. Read the sentence. Next sentence also.
similarly, stories can be told about the impact of Western conquest on other parts of 19th century world.
Indentured labor migration from India. The example of indentured labor migration from India also illustrates the two-sided nature of the 19th century world. It was a world of faster economic growth as well as a great misery, higher income for some and poverty for others, technological advances in some areas and new forms of in the 19th century, hundreds of thousands of Indian and Chinese laborers went to work on plantations, in mines, and in road and railway construction projects around the world. In India, indentured laborers were hired under contracts which promised return travel to India after they had worked 5 years on their employer's plantation.
Most Indian indentured workers came from the present-day regions of eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, central India, and the dry districts of Tamil Nadu. In the mid-19th century, these regions experienced many changes. Cottage industries declined. Land rents rose. Lands were cleared for mines and plantations. All this affected the lives of poor. They failed to pay their rents, became deeply indebted, and were forced to migrate in search of work.
The main destination of Indian endangered migrants were the Caribbean islands, mainly Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname. Mauritius
Mauritius,
and
which
Fiji, closer homes. Tamil migrants went to Ceylon and Malaya. In, Endangered workers were also recruited for tree plantation in Assam.
recruitment was done by agents engaged by employers and paid a small commission. Many migrants agreed to take up work hoping to escape poverty or operation in their op- operations and in their home villages. Agents also tempted the prospective migrants by providing false information about final destination, modes of travel, and nature of the work and living and working conditions there. Often, migrants were not even told that they were to embark on a long sea voyage. Sometimes agents even forcibly abducted less willing migrants. So these were the hardships faced by the poor people. They were forced, they were taken to different destinations. They were not told about it. They were not uh, told about what type of mode they are going to take, whether it is a sea route, it is sea. Like even if you take up the bus, at times it bus or train or anything, you feel sick about it. You feel vomiting, right? Nausea is that happen. So all these things you have to first convey that okay, this is the mode of transport we are going to take, or mode of travel we are going to take. But all these things were not told to them, whether they were hide because uh, they they feared that the Indians, the laborers, or people will deny going with them. So forcibly they were taken, they were boarded on the voyages. Okay. So 19th century endangered has been described as a new system of slavery. On arrival on the plantations, laborers found conditions to be different from what they had imagined. So what they were thinking that we will get enough money in the hand, we will be able to satisfy our needs, we will be able to repay the loans what we have taken. But when they finally went to the destination and they started working, they found that living and working conditions were very harsh and they were treated very badly. Okay, so whatever they had imagined, it was just the opposite of what they dreamt of. The living and working conditions were very harsh and they were very few legal rights, very less legal rights. At times in the plantation, they were not allowed to go out of a particular area. Though the plantation farm was quite big enough, but they were restricted to some areas, some square feet area, and they were allowed to work there. They were allowed to move in a particular area itself. Okay, so here we end up with reading of today's.
If you like our videos, do share them and subscribe to our channel. If you want awesome quizzes, write to us. Keep watching and keep learning with Walnut.